Okay, so I just made a view there with the exterior walls hidden, so we can start to look at the interior structural elements. And so, as I suspected, the truss or the roof structure is not a true truss. So in other words, it doesn't span the entire distance. It's supported by a post in the middle, which would be required structurally. And that's why they've got this, what is it, a newel post, I think, the one that goes up in the middle. And that's often a sign of a thing that looks like a truss, roof structure looks like a truss, but actually isn't functioning as a truss. So a true truss spans all the way across the distance of the chord or the piece at the bottom and forms a single structural element. And in this case, it's not a single structure because it can't function without those columns there to support it. So we need to put the columns in. Simple as that. And so you've got the family elements that I gave you in the last project that you did anyway. I've put them into a folder for this project as well, which I'll just show you. So in the folder on the P drive, design, CAD 4, George Street, and then Revit families. I've just added a couple of extra files. Well, I'll clean that up a bit. So there we are. So I've got this timber square column with capital. But remember, we set this up for a different project, so the properties are going to be a little bit different. And it's a good opportunity just to look at the way you work with parameters a little bit more. So we've got here the picture that should give us an idea about the size of the post there. And I'm going to guesstimate that at 250. Let's maybe see if we can find any other references. That's probably close enough. We can always adjust it. So if I select the shaft there, even if I go to edit extrusion, I'm not going to be able to easily change that, because if I do, it'll give me an error. And that tells you, when you're working with a family particularly, that it most likely has a parameter defined already that will let you change those properties. And it's easier to use that rather than trying to move the objects yourself. So remember, you've got this family types option, which will show you all the parameters that have been defined in a particular project. Sorry, in a particular file. So this is a family file, and you always have that family types option in a separate family file. So there's the size 250 is actually pretty good. You can always choose different sizes from there, or you can add your own if you go to new, and then you can change the property here. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that, how to set the size there. And then the height is going to be relative to the level it's attached to. Now, this is set up with a level above, because if you look at the family categories, so this is the button above family types, you've got the option there to set the category of the family. And that's going to determine a lot of the other options you have available in a particular family type, also in a particular family type's a bad way of saying it, in a particular kind of family. And so this family was started with the structural columns template, and therefore it has these properties predefined, like a level above. So you won't always get that when you're making your own families. It depends on the template you use to begin it. And you can change the category after you've made a family, but you won't always get everything set up the way you do in the templates. So you need to be aware of that. And so there you can see the level, and we need to be aware of that to do the next thing, which is to get this capital set up properly. So I can move that level, and you can see then that the capital and the shaft always go with it. So I'm modelling the top in relation to the level at the top, not the level at the bottom. And if you're unsure, you can even set the height to match the heights you have in your project. So looking at the level value there, we know it's 4,800 floor to floor, which gives us a very tall column. That's okay. And so that's what it'll look like on the on one of our levels at least. They might not be the same height, but that doesn't matter. All right, so then we've got these capitals, which in this case are not rounded at the end, and also they're not, or they're a bit longer as well. So I'm just going to have to eyeball that. And I'm going to say it's fairly long, so maybe 800 either side of the centre line. Could even be bigger than that, but I'll just say 800. And so to make that easier, I'm going to put in some reference planes. And show you a few tricks for dimensioning these. So I'm going to dimension from the centre line of the column. Notice I'm not dimensioning from the column itself, and that's a really good rule of thumb when you're putting in dimensions, especially for parameters, dimensions where you're going to manipulate the values. It's much better to dimension from a reference plane than from a physical object like a 3D surface. So I'm going to dimension from this reference plane to this one over here, and then to, oops, sorry, I'll do that all in one go. I'll just start that again. So from here to here to here, place it above, and now this is the key to it. I'm going to make that equals, and it's going to tell me constraints are not satisfied. So I'm going to cancel that, and then I'm going to put in a new dimension from one side to the other, place it above, and then I'm going to select that new dimension and add a label to it. And I'm going to call this capital width. That'll do. Now it should let me. No, it doesn't want it. It's trying to move the reference plane there in the centre, and we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to even think about trying to pin that. It's really important that you don't move that plane. That's a defining plane. And yeah, it's a left-right reference. I'm going to set these two planes here to be not references, and see if it'll let me do it then. There we go. Okay, sometimes you've just got to fiddle with the options for your planes. I can probably even set these to be references again now. And then now, this is the really tricky bit. If you try this on your own and you don't do it in the way I have, it probably won't work for you. So I'm just going to show you, if I change this width here, and it's locked. Why is it locked? Let's go and do it in family types. So I've got capital width, and it's locked. How did that happen? Oh, it's a reporting dimension. Okay, I'll just delete that one. I'll do it again. That was stupid of me. I didn't mean to set it as a reporting dimension. Okay, so from here to here, and let's just add a new label. Okay, so capital width. Oh, so let's put a dash in and get rid of the other one. That's better. Okay, I must have ticked reporting without meaning to. So now this is what I really wanted to show you. I can change that size now. So I'm going to make it 1600. And notice how it moves the two planes either side, centred on the centre. Now, if you don't make this a parameter, that won't work. It'll give you that error that I was getting before. And it can be really frustrating. I see a lot of people try to use that equals dimension to keep something centered, and then they put in an overall dimension and can't make it work. But the key to it is making it with a parameter, and then it works every time. Well, not every time, but you'll get it to work. Okay, so I've got that capital width property. I'm going to go into my family types, and I've got the other one, which I don't want anymore. So I can always just remove that. There we go, and I've just got the one I want. Okay, so that's half the battle. Now I can select my capital, edit extrusion, and I'm tempted to show you a few little tricky things here. We've got these radius options. No, look, I'll do this another time. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just delete those. It's going to make it a bit too hard. Working with curves and parameters is definitely possible with Revit, but it makes it much harder because you have to establish the center point usually as well as the radius. So we can worry about that later. And so there, I've got this B value, which I was using based on the column size. And so I'm just going to delete those. And then use the Align tool, pick my reference plane, and then the edge, tick to and then lock, and then the reference plane, and then the edge, and then again lock. Okay, so again, tick to finish. Let's have a look at it in 3D. And do what's called flexing. Very important when you're working with parameters in a family. Go to family types and put in some different values. So I'm going to make this 1,000. Apply, not a problem. Oops, 2,000. Apply, again, not a problem. Okay, so let's have a look at the size. Yeah, look, that's the same as the column width, so I'm going to leave that set to the size of the column, which is a really nice option. So now if I go and change the B value there, say 500, the capital thickness changes as well, which makes sense. There we go. So the final thing there is that the capital width property, I've got it as a type parameter, which means that I really should have a different type set up for every capital width size, which is probably overkill. So instead, I'm going to select that name where it says capital width, go to modify, and change that to an instance property. Okay, so I'm just going to then save that. Capital square ends, I suppose. Okay, so I'll just load that into the project, and it will snap to the grid lines, but here it probably doesn't take too long to just place it manually. Now it's telling me that one's not visible, so I'm going to go into my section view and find out why. It's because I forget. There's always an option I forget every time with structural columns. I'm going to delete that one and go and place it again. So remember, you won't get this to come up with the regular column architectural. You have to go to structural columns. And so columns, structural columns especially, are usually used by engineers, and they think a bit differently, they work a bit differently to designers. They do the subfloor structure first, which makes sense, but that's just not the way we work. So it's set to depth by default for them. You just need to change that to height. And then the level above will be the height, so level 1. Right, but then we're going to have an offset value as well. So I'm going to just place that and then have a look in the section. You can see then if I select that column, we've got the floor structure above. So that's the next level. Let's get the photos from the level below. There it is, but that's not a great photo of it. That's better. Oh, so these ones do have the curve. Okay, great. Well, we can go and get the other one, or we can make a variation on that. But for now, I'll just do the square ones with a different size. Yeah, and the curve is a nice feature, so we should keep that. Okay, so this might make it clear why that instance option was set, because I don't have to go and duplicate or anything like that. I can simply go into properties here now and give a different capital width. So I think that one is a bit narrower, so let's make it 1000. There we are. Then we've got the floor joists and some beams. So we've got the joists there. Let's just say they're 150, and then the beam is 200. So that's going to be 350. Yeah, which is nice to have a good decent structure. 350, and then you've got this plate as well, which is, let's just say, another 50. So 400. And then you've got the floor lining as well. We can worry about that later. So for now, I'll just say top offset minus 400. And then back into the plan view, you can simply copy that. And I might just tick multiple. You can use place on grids, but this won't take long. All right, so then I can select all of those columns, copy to clipboard, and then go to level 1, modify, paste, line to current view, have a look in the section, and we can see then that the heights here are different. I think mine are right. So if they're not, it's not a problem anyway, because we're working from the levels. So here we've got the beam under the blocking piece. So let's say all up that is 300 to the bottom of the truss. But the truss there is below the level also. So 550. Okay, so a good trick there is to select the columns in the level 1 floor plan. That way I can just select one of them, right click, select all instances visible in view, and then might still just change back to the section. So I can see the change as it happens. I can simply then change that top offset to minus 550. They look a bit low. We'll have a look at that. But, oh yeah, and so then also I can make the that instance property different as well. So again, select them in the level 1 floor plan to make life easier. And so I can see the change as I do it. Now I can go and change that capital width to 1600 without duplicating those. And there we are. Sorry? Oh yeah, no. So, okay, so I should show you that. Okay, so back to here. What's happening there? Yeah, that's a good point actually. So I was going to select that, edit family, and then simple option there is to select that piece only, go to visibility settings, and then turn off this option, and then maybe do that one as well. We don't ever want to see that in plan. Or actually, we might want to see that in a ceiling plan. So, yeah, that's a bit of a funny one. But for now, we'll just turn that off. And so, if I load that back in, there we are. So that at least gets it from the plan. We'll have to think about what to do with the ceiling plan afterwards, but at least that's the floor plan's more important. And it'll still show in the other views. So I'll just get you started with the other elements. I won't do all of it. So you have the file I've given you called adjustable timber component. It's a box, basically, that you can set to any size. So you can use that for your joists, your beams, anything. So I'm just going to use, I might check the category. I think I've made it structural framing. So you should know the category. It'll help you to place it later. So I'm just going to use load into project, click OK. And here I don't need to know the category. It's chosen it for me. So I'm just going to place it on the ground. Let me just have a look at the picture there so I can get thinking about this. That's the one. Okay, so we've got beams going across that way and joists going the other way. So I'll just put one this way, doesn't really matter. And actually maybe I'll just press space and do one the other way. So I've got one in each direction. And then in section, can lift them up off the ground, probably just by clicking and dragging. So yeah, so the joists do go the long way. Oh, oops, didn't mean to do that. Just double clicked on it. And so I'll drag that joist up to the, well, don't want to take it all the way to the floor because I need to go and now make this floor just be the floorboards. I'm going to edit type, duplicate, and floorboards. Uh, 20 mil, doesn't hurt to put the size in. I'll put the material on later on. And so then you can just move the joist up there, stretch the end, and stretch it all the way. I mean, you probably know they wouldn't have pieces of timber this long, but they would just join them end to end. And then the beams will go underneath. Alright, so this joist here needs to be reduced in size. So I'm just going to go to edit type, duplicate, and this will be 150 by 50. I probably already have that size actually. No, I don't. There we go. Oh, I didn't change the actual size, so there, height 150. That's better. Okay, move it up. The beam is, well, we're just going to say 200 by 50. So that's okay. It's just got to come up. And we've got this piece here, which is, well, I said 100, but then I've added in the floor thickness, so we've got to go and bring this down a bit more. So that's 30. Well, my maths was out a bit. So that's okay. You can just select all of those columns and take them down another 70 mil. So you would have beams at every column. You can just use the align tool and center those. And then copy them all across, but you'd probably want to stretch them first. So it's really helpful to have just the two in each direction. And so there, I can't see them. So when that happens, check your visibility settings. If I go to visibility graphics over here, and then down to the structural sections, you can see their structural framing is turned off. That's a default setting. So there now, that's turned on, I can see it. And so by stretching this beam across either side, then when I copy it, it'll already be the right length. And yeah, so it looks like we just have one on each column. And so that's fairly easy just to copy then using the grids. Hopefully you can see now how useful those grids are whenever you have structural columns. And then the joist might start by moving that all the way over to the wall. And there, it's probably going to help to use the array tool. I don't care if it goes into that wall. So I'll just click on array. And these are old, so they could be 600. Just wondering if we get any visual cues there. Do you know what they have to be now? They have to be 450. You can't do 600. Until pretty recently, you could still do them 600, but 450 was recommended. Now, though, it's required that you do 450. You can't do 600 anymore. No, 450 setters. So, yeah. So 450. So between so between them would depend on the thickness, but yeah, 450 setters. From the centre line of each. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So these look a little bit closer than normal though, so I'd say they could be 450. I mean, it's all imperial. This would have been built way before metric, but yeah, let's see if there's any brickwork in there we can measure against. Might give us an idea. There we are. What's that? Ah, is that the same building? Oh yeah, could be. I can't quite see the bricks. They do look pretty close, but it can look really tight when you do... oh, here we are. Even if they are 450, sometimes it's better just to show them 600, as long as you know that in reality they might not be. So we only need 3 bricks for it to be 600. So I'm going to say, yeah, let's do it 600. It's an old building. So I'm just going to click a base point, bring it down, type in 600, enter, and then guesstimate the number I need. So I'm going to say 15 maybe. Okay, not even close. So because it's an array, that's not a problem. I can just say 25, and nearly right. So 24, and we'll just not have that one at the end, which I don't think anyone will mind. So that will give us a pretty good idea of the structure. But there's still just one piece underneath we need now. So you've got the, I'll just use the beam there, and go back to my section view. I'm going to copy that down. And duplicate that and make it 100 by, what did I decide again? Tempted to say 100 by 100, but it's probably not, is it? No, it's wider. So it's, yeah, so it's the width of the columns, which is 250. So 100 by 250. Yeah, so sorry, 250 by 100. So I should say that. So 100 high by 250 wide. There we go. It's facing the wrong way, so I can go to my plan, my ceiling plan, ground floor ceiling plan, press space, and that will flip it. Just going to nudge that across using the arrows on the keyboard, and then drag to line up with the walls. Okay, so that's getting close. Then I'll let you work out most of the other pieces, but I'll just show you one little thing. The little triangular section you have there, I'm sure you know you could do the bottom part with another copy of those pieces we've been working with. And you could even just copy well, I'll just copy this one down. So let's go section 1. So it's, what is it, 1, 2, 3, 4 from the front. So it's here. And there's one missing, so that's why they put it in there. Well, that's to take a column out. So 1, 2, 3, so it's there. So this column's not there. Okay, so I'm going to copy that piece down. And all I need to do is change that to the beam size that I've already created. Drag that across. So I'm just eyeballing that. Yep, that seems about right. Three metres underneath, that should be enough. So, what I really wanted to remind you about there is well, a couple of things actually. The column can be copied across. So I shouldn't have deleted that other one, because this now can be given an offset. So I might make that a round number, and to do that it will be easier to put in a reference plane and measure to that. So I can make that 3300 or 3250. And then align the beam to that. Just makes it a bit easier. And then this column, like I was saying, can be given an offset. So it's 32, yeah, 3250 of course, I should have done that. So base offset 3250. We'll bring the base up. And then to model those side pieces in, the struts really, just wanted to remind you what to think about there. So this should maybe, if you haven't been modelling for a while in Revit, get you practicing that again. So using model in place. And I'm going to set it to structural framing as well. And we'll call it structural bracing, I suppose. And let's just do it to the centre. So I'm going to make an extrusion now. And what do you think is going to happen if I click on extrusion in a section view? Okay, so after a while you'll get used to this. Whenever you're working in a project, if you make any solid, but particularly something like an extrusion, in a section view or an elevation view, there's no plane set by default. So it will always prompt you to set a work plane. So you should be expecting that. In a family, it won't always happen because planes tend to be defined in those files, but not in a project file. So you need to be thinking about that. And in this case, I don't have any planes created that are going to be very useful. Actually, sorry, I could use a grid. Yeah, I could use the grid, the centre, which is B, would work pretty well actually. The other option would be to pick a plane, and I could pick the surface of one of these columns or the beam. Up to you. But I think grid B should work pretty well. And so I'm just going to click OK. And I'll maybe just show you in the plan view, grid B, you can see there runs through the centre, so I'm drawing on that plane. It's a bit hard to see there. You zoom in, there's the B. Running right through the middle. So I'm going to set my extrusion start to -125 and my extrusion end to 125, because we know the column thickness is 250. And you can see that is flush. Well, actually not quite flush, it's a little bit less, so let's just make that less. So I'm going to make the extrusion end 100 and the extrusion start -100. So it'll be a little inside on both ends. And so then let's just look at that again. We've got the width there, probably 150. So I'm going to draw a line from the centre there to the corner of my column. And then using offset, I'll make the offset value 75 and pick my line. And then I'm going to turn copy off and pick that line again, and this time it'll move it. So I've got it 150 wide, centered on that center line, but the center line's now gone. And then I can use pick lines and just pick the edges of the other things where it needs to join that all together. Oops. There we go. So I'll finish that, and then mirror, pick axis, and just pick my grid line. Again, hopefully that'll make it even clearer how useful those grid lines are. And there we go. So into 3D view. One last little touch. Wouldn't hurt to make the material the same. So I'll check. Oh, and this beam actually is too small. That beam's a thicker one than the others. So I do need to make a new beam size for that. Yeah. Okay, so duplicate, and that is, oh, doesn't look square. So it's actually deeper as well. So I'm going to say it is 300 by, let's just do 300 by 200. Might need to be 250, but yeah, that should be okay. So, sorry, wrong way around, 200 by 300. Height should always be second. So 300 high, 200 wide. And maybe I'll just go and move that down with the align tool. And so again, back to the jutting pieces. To set the material there, have to go to edit and place, select those two, and then find my wood material. It's not wood truss, sorry, I've forgotten what I used. What have I used? Wood structure. Oops. There we are. Yeah, they could be a bit chunkier, I think, but at least that's going to give the impression that you want. Okay, so I'll let you have a go at doing the upper level, finishing that off. And so just have a look in the photos, see what's missing. It's really just a couple of pieces there. It shouldn't be too hard. For the blocking piece, just do a box. You don't need to do the collar there like that. Just do a box underneath. And that should do it. So, does that make sense?